Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Good afternoon, good morning, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We're going to continue with our book discussion. This time we're going to continue with the book that we're covering in this session, William Dalrymple's The Anarchy. And we've done quite a bit of the book. We're now moving on to chapter number 3, titled Sweeping the Broom of Plunder. So Siraj ud-Daula made his way across to Calcutta. Governor Drake wasn't prepared. They were able to overpower them. Siraj ud-Daula and his army, which came marching with a force of 70,000 soldiers, and they were able to press the East India Company. And Mr. Drake was forced to abandon everything, and he left there, and that left Siraj ud-Daula free to plunder the fort. In the same evening that they took over the fort, the Calcutta fort, the author says that that evening, having swept the town of Calcutta with the broom of plunder, that's the reason the title of the chapter is Sweeping the Broom with Plunder, Siraj ud-Daula was brought in his litter to visit his new possession. He held a conference or darbar in the center of the fort, where he announced that Calcutta was to be renamed Ali Nagar after Imam Ali, appropriately for a prominent city in a Shia-ruled province. Okay, and so soon after Siraj ud-Daula had taken control and plundered and pillaged and taken everything from the fort, he left. He made his way away from the garrison. As soon as he left, things began to really fall apart. So the moment he took over the fort from the East India Company in Calcutta, things began to fall apart. There was an incident that happened actually in the same garrison, where a drunk soldier who was being stripped of his goods became very, very angry and pulled out a pistol and shot a Mughal soldier dead, and that led to a lot of soldiers from the East India Company being imprisoned. Many of them died. But in any case, losing Calcutta was the loss of a lucrative trading station. Okay, and this obviously would have made the company directors and authorities back in London very, very worried and concerned. It was a huge economic blow for the East India Company, losing this garrison, this fort in Calcutta. And it was all because they started building something without the permission of the Nawab. You can see how this unfolded as well. So the company set an agenda where they planned refitted ships. They got cannons ready, the latest cannons, they got the latest technology ready, and they sent a troop of armies all the way to India to recapture this place as well. And this was such an important place for them that they had to wage war. And this was the first time the East India Company declared war on Siraj ud-Daula. Okay, a company was waging war with an empire, basically. Can you imagine that? Imagine a company today going to war with a country. So a company was waging war with in the name of a company. But remember what we said before, that this company was also very much intertwined with state power. So almost it was very much intertwined with the state. So it was really, the company was a front, but it was really the country that was waging war against the Mughal Empire, because a lot of the shareholders, of course, we mentioned in previous lectures, were MPs, people who were members of the parliament. And so this was very, very important as well. And so they reclaimed, they waged war. It's a long story, but they waged war and they reclaimed Calcutta, and it came back in the hands of the company as well. Then Watson, who was the sort of person in charge, set off to attack Siraj ud-Daula's fort. So they not only were they content with taking back Calcutta, but they went after what's called a Hooghly Bandar to exact revenge. So they wanted to take revenge as well. and they basically destroyed his own port as well. So not only did they take their own port back, but they set out to destroy the port of Siraj ud-Daula as well, to basically distress it, to sort of incite fear in Siraj ud-Daula as well. Siraj ud-Daula came back to capture Calcutta. He had 60,000 strong sort of army, men of soldiers coming with him to try and capture Calcutta. There was of toing and froing. There was a battle. Robert Clive at one point thought he'd been defeated, but actually he had the upper hand, and he was able to defeat or attack Siraj ud-Daula. And they basically, Siraj ud-Daula and Robert Clive made a peace agreement, which was called the Treaty of Ali Nagar, which basically gave the company gave into all the company's demands. All the company's demands, Siraj ud-Daula had to give into, restoring all the English privileges and freeing all English goods of taxes, as well as allowing the company to keep their fortifications and establish mint, establish their own coins as well. And then so he went back to Murshidabad, Siraj ud-Daula, and Robert Clive and Watson were astonished at how much they had actually been successful this time, right? They managed to get hold of Calcutta, retain control of Calcutta, and get an agreement, a treaty, which was in their favor. I'm going to read something from the book. And he says that for his part, however, Watson reported to the crown, because obviously Watson was working for the country, for the state, not the company. And for him, things had just become a great deal more complicated. A few days earlier, he had been officially notified of the outbreak of what future generations would call a 7 Years' War. This was in Europe, where it started off in Europe. Around the world, from Quebec to the Senegal River, from Ohio to Hanover, Minoga to Cuba, hostilities were now finally breaking between Britain and France. So Britain and France were at war with each other in every imperial theatre. Watson's instructions arrived in a packet from London with an official copy of the declaration of war and a letter from the Admiralty directing all officers under the king to distress the enemy as far as it is in their power. They were basically told that forget all of this stuff in India, you need to go to war. We're at war with the French. Watson was unequivocal about what he needed to do: attack the French, right? We're at war with the French now. So they just managed to get hold of Calcutta. They've managed to get all this wealth, these treaties, but then they've been told that at home they've waged war with the French. And in the case of Bengal, that meant starting by attacking the French colony of Chandan Nagar, which was a French colony 20 miles upstream. So now they had to go after the French who were in India, as we've discussed as well. In any case, there was a battle. They managed to capture Chandan Nagar, and it was really, really a decisive blow to the French ambition in India. Okay, with the fall of Chandan Nagar, the gate of the entire country was thrown open to the English. So now it was all free for the English to take over India. They didn't really need to worry about competition from the French as such as well. Siraj ud-Daula was watching all of this, and he was sort of in a state of indecisiveness because, of course, he'd been defeated and been made to sign a treaty with the British. Okay, he wanted to help the French against the British, but he didn't want to give an excuse to the company because he'd obviously signed a treaty, and so he wasn't meant to be fighting against the British because he signed a treaty with them. In any case, Siraj ud-Daula's flight from Calcutta, because he'd been made to leave Calcutta, and after Clive's attack, a night attack followed by the humiliation of the Treaty of Ali Nagar had broken the spell of fear which Siraj had kept his court cowed. So Siraj ud-Daula, as we read and covered in the previous chapter, was very, very, very much a fearful person, fearsome person. People were afraid of him. But seeing that he'd been defeated, he'd been humiliated, he'd been made to sign a treaty, people were less confident about him from his own people as well. So he had alienated many of his grandfather's old military commanders, particularly the veteran general Mir Jafar Ali Khan. And this is someone that we will come back to later on, Mir Jafar Ali Khan. He was an Arab soldier of fortune, Originally from the Shia shrine town of Najaf in modern Iraq, Mir Jafar had played his part in many of Ali Verdi's most crucial victories against the Marathas and had most recently led the successful attack in Calcutta. So he'd been someone that was helping Ali Verdi, we talked about in the previous chapter, and he'd been very loyal to the empire, but Siraj ud-Daula wasn't treating him very well. So you can see very, very clearly that, you know, if you don't treat your own people, your own generals very, 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 very respectfully, then that will and can, in this case, turn against you as well. So by having taken down and defeated the company in Calcutta, he had been sidelined, right? So Mir Jafar Ali Khan had been sidelined, and the governorship given instead to a Hindu rival called Raja Manikchand. Okay, he and his brothers in arms from the Maratha wars, commanders merit, as well as all deserving utmost regard, were tired of living under such an administration. They weren't happy living under Siraj ud-Daula's kingship. And they wish no better than to be rid of such a government by Siraj ud-Daula's death. So it wasn't just the British who had problems with Siraj ud-Daula, his own people from his own ranks weren't happy with him as well. And so because Robert Clive had now demonstrated his military capacity in taking back Calcutta and then seizing Chandan Nagar, the plotters, these people who are against Siraj ud-Daula, decided to reach out to the company as a third option, hoping to harness its military forces for their own ends. So they became people who use the company for their own personal ends as well. So you can see everybody's fighting for their own piece of the cake, even people from within the empire as well. Okay, and so a possible coup was an option of taking power from Siraj ud-Daula as well. And then Robert Clive actually mentions that that this is something that he would have been interested in as well. And so Jagat Self, if you remember, the bankers, they'd also been part of this coup as well, this plot, but they were not happy with Siraj ud-Daula as well. So they were interested in taking power, engaging a coup from taking power from Siraj ud-Daula, who's been basically upsetting everyone. And so they saw the British as an opportunity to get their own back as well. So the bankers and merchants of Bengal who sustained Siraj ud-Daula's regime had finally turned against him and united with the disaffected parts of his own military. Now they sought to bring in the mercenary troops of the East India Company to help dispose him. So basically, they wanted to get rid of Siraj ud-Daula. His own people were using the East India Company against him. So this is something new in Indian history. A group of Indian financiers plotting with an international trading corporation to use its own private security force to overthrow a regime they saw threatening the income they earned from trade. So this was always about money. This is always about trade, and everybody was doing whatever they needed to do to protect their income. Okay. In fact, the East India Company men on the ground were ignoring their strict instructions from London, which were to repulse the French and avoid any sort of engagement with the Mughal hosts. So from Britain, they'd been told that you're fighting the French, you're not engaging with our hosts. So they saw them so you can see how the reality on the ground was very different from how people were seeing what was going on in Britain. They've been given specific instructions because of the 7-Year War to fight with the French in India and not to engage with the hosts, which were the Mughal Empire. But what was actually happening in India was the French were defeated, and they were going further and now plotting to take over various places from the Mughal Empire as well. But seeing opportunities for personal enrichment as well as political and economic gain for the company, they dressed up the conspiracy in colors that they knew would appeal to their masters and presented a coup as if it were primarily aimed at excluding the French from Bengal forever. So they gave the impression that the reason they were doing all of this was to take control from the French, but really they were engaged in a coup to take over Bengal, because Bengal was obviously a very, very successful and prosperous place. And so the British wanted to have that all to themselves as well. And so they wanted to overthrow Siraj ud-Daula, and the members of the coup, the plotters, promised Robert Clive huge amounts of wealth. Like, if you do this for us, we're going to give you lots of wealth, we're going to give you lots of land. And so this led to the famous battle, which I won't go into because lots of YouTube videos that you can watch and you can watch stuff on the internet. The Battle of Plassey. Plassey, Plassey, in the colloquial language is Plassey, Battle of Plassey, which was very, very important. This was a decisive battle between Siraj ud-Daula and the East India Company, in which eventually Siraj ud-Daula was defeated, and that led to the East India Company becoming a very powerful trading post in India as well. So initially they felt that they were being defeated, but they got the upper hand, and the East India Company eventually defeated Siraj ud-Daula's army, and they basically took hold. It says here, and this is very, very important because there was a battle taking place and it was raining really, really heavy. Then towards noon, the skies began to darken, thunder boomed, and torrential monsoon storm broke over the battlefield, soaking the men and turning the ground instantly into a muddy swamp. This is the battlefield. The company troops made sure to keep their powder and fuses dry under tarpaulins, but the Mughals did not. And this was a turning point. Up until then, the Mughals had the upper hand. Within 10 minutes of the commencement of the downpour, and by the time Clive had reappeared on the roof of the hunting lodge, having changed into dry uniform, all Siraj's guns had fallen completely silent because they'd been made wet from the rain as well. But the British, or the company men, were able to keep their guns protected from the rain, and eventually they were able to defeat the Siraj ud-Daula. Siraj ud-Daula had to escape on a camel. He was captured and he was killed. He was mutilated as well. Mir Jafar, who we talked about before, Mir Jafar Ali Khan, who basically turned against his own emperor, if you like, his own Nawab, was given the governorship of Bengal in return for helping Sir Clive take over and defeat him in this battle. So Sir Clive basically made him a puppet Nawab, took all his money, and he was happy with this. So Mir Jafar became the puppet ruler of Bengal, and so they benefited immensely. So all these people who turned against Siraj ud-Daula from his own people were benefiting. They used the British, the East India Company, for their advantage as well. Then both of them, it's really interesting. So Robert Clive and Mir Jafar Ali Khan, they both went to the bankers, the financiers, Jagat Seth, right? So they went to thank them for financing them and supporting them. So you can see the bankers really controlling all of this. They were using it to their advantage. So when we talk about a credit crunch, when we talk about banking, you can see even in East India, even in India at the time, it was the financiers, the bankers, who were really funding the wars and benefiting from regional infighting, global fighting. They were the beneficiaries of all of this as well. For example, Clive got some prize money, which was at the time worth £234,000, as well as a jagir. A jagir is a landed estate worth an annual payment of £27,000. He became suddenly one of the most wealthiest people in Europe. Okay, at the time that would have been around £3 million. So Robert Clive financially benefited from this. His job wasn't to fight. His job wasn't to get involved in this. His job was to fight the French, but he was seeking personal enrichment. So you can see a lot of people were using the company and the benefit that they had, the relationship they had with the state, the parliament, and the country to their advantage to fill their own pockets as well. Okay. Siraj ud-Daula, as I mentioned, was killed. He was hacked to pieces. He was only 25 years old as well. So at 25 years old, he'd lived quite an eventful life, Siraj ud-Daula, as well. Clive got some more money. It was one of the largest windfalls in history. In modern terms, around £232 million. Okay, that's how much the company got for sort of being involved in this coup and fighting for these people who weren't happy with Siraj ud-Daula. And he took about 22 million for himself out of 232 million that was given to the company as a windfall. 22 million was given to Clive, and he immediately dispatched his money as well. So this revolution that the East India Company were involved in really worked in their favor, and it changes that the Battle of Plassey. Battle of Plassey is a very important moment in Indian history in terms of the East India Company. Definitely read up on it. Definitely watch the videos on it, and it was really something that affected a permanent and profound change in the history of India. This was the moment when a commercial corporation first acquired real and tangible political power. Okay, it was at Plassey that the company had triumphantly asserted itself as a strong military force within the Mughal Empire. The Marathas, who had terrorized and looted Bengal in the 1740s, were remembered as cruel and violent. The company's plunder of the same region a decade later was more orderly and methodical. They were very organized in the way they did it. But its greed was arguably deadlier because it was more skillful and relentless and above all permanent. Right? They didn't do what other people do, where they came into India or into certain parts of India and took wealth and made their and ran away. The British were there to really cash in on India as well. It initiated a period of unbounded looting and asset stripping by the company, which the British themselves described as the shaking of the pagoda tree. Okay, and so this was something that helped the East India Company really establish itself as a political power in India, this Battle of Plassey. So this is something to bear in mind. And obviously they began to now put it in Bengal with the example of Mir Jafar Ali Khan as a puppet Nawab, who was really just there because they wanted to keep the masses happy, but in reality the power lay with the East India Company. I think that's enough for now for today. We'll continue with the next chapter, a prince of little capacity. We have to return back to one of our interesting characters we haven't discussed in this chapter, but we did discuss in the previous chapter. We'll talk about him in the next video. I hope you found this useful. As always, please do provide feedback, comments, questions. I'm happy to answer them. Until then, stay safe. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.